It's really a decision of the board.
It is,
So I
yeah.
think we can put it on the agenda if you want to talk to them.
Yeah.
I actually have an agenda confirmation. Add that. I mean, you have obviously a lot of.
Okay, good afternoon, Council. I'd like to welcome members here
Recording in
the
progress.
Good afternoon. Take two. I'd like to take an opportunity to welcome those who are here in attendance, those who are participating online, to Council and staff, and to call the Council meeting for Monday, June the 20th, 2022 to order. I'm going to look down my right to Councillor Hamlin to read the land acknowledgement, please.
More than 15,000 years, the First Nations walked upon and cared for the lands we now call home. Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, Ojibwe, and many others who were families, friends, and communities the way we are today. The town of Collingwood acknowledges the Lake Simcoe-Nottawasaga Treaty of 1818 and the relationship it establishes with the original inhabitants of Turtle Island. We acknowledge the reality of our shared history and the current contributions of Indigenous people within our community. We seek to continuing empowering expressions of pride amongst all of the diverse stakeholders in this area. We seek to do better and to continue to recognize, learn, and grow in friendship and community, nation to nation.
Thank you, Councillor Hamlin. And with that, I will look for a mover and a seconder to adopt the agenda. And that is that the content of the Council agenda for June 20th, 2022 be adopted as presented. And mover and a seconder, I've got Councillor Madigan and Acting Deputy Mayor McLeod. Before I call the vote, any questions, comments?
Sorry.
Yes.
It should be adopted as amended.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And there were two amendments. There were two that came out on Friday. Is that correct?
So there was 3 in total. The staff report CAO 2022-09 and the bylaw that goes with that staff report, bylaw number 2022-052, and the addition of item number 14.2, which is the Depochi Management Limited and Live, Work, Learn, Play correspondence.
Okay. So I'm going to take this and I'm going to put it over there. And I'm going to bring this in here. With that said, thank you, Deputy Clerk Dahl. So as read, as amended, again, I've got a mover and a seconder. All those in favor? And it's carried unanimously. Thank you. Are there any declarations of pecuniary interest this evening? And I've got 3, so I'll go with Councillor Doherty, Councillor Hamlin, and Councillor Carrier.
Thank you, Chair. I will be declaring a non-disqualifying conflict of interest relative to the discussion on 80 Madeline Drive, which is included in staff report on ICBL and exemptions, because I am a member of the Blue Mountain Watershed Trust Foundation.
Great. Thank you. Councillor Hamlin? Great, thank you. And Councillor Carrier.
Thank you, Acting Mayor Hall. My item is 14.2, the DEPUTATIONS Management and Live, Work, Learn, Play regarding the Minister's zoning order. As I've said in the past, under the Code of Conduct, I have a declaration of disqualifying interest. Mr. DePoche and I have been for the past 12 years. Under any reasonable expectation, somebody would consider that to be bias. Therefore, it's a disqualifying interest.
Thank you. Okay, so with that, then we will move forward with the adoption of the minutes, and 4.1 being the regular meeting of council held May 30th, 2022, that the minutes of the council meeting held May 30th, 2022 be approved as presented. Again, a mover and a seconder. I've got Councillor Jeffrey, Councillor Hamlin. Before I call the vote, any questions? And those in the affirmative? That's carried unanimously. Is there, under 4.2, any business arising from the previous minutes? Okay. Seeing none, we'll move to community announcements. And I'm going to start on my left, and I will go down the proper order. And I'll do my best going across the table. So, Deputy Mayor, go ahead.
Thank you. Two little ones today. First of all, what a delight it was to attend the air show at the CFB Borden on Saturday afternoon in spite of the very chilly weather. On behalf of the town to accept the invitation that came to the mayor, but he couldn't attend, and so I did. And at the table I was at, a distinguished, very distinguished man came to sit down, and a Collingwood resident, retired Major General Richard Romer, and the parade of military people who wanted to speak with him, even for a moment, was just so impressive to watch. And he was gracious the entire time and talked with everyone and told stories. It was just a really touching moment to see at an occasion like that, which we've missed for the last 2 years. And I'll thank him for his time. Secondly, tomorrow morning, if you want to get up really early, the radio girl in me wants to plug CBC Radio's show tomorrow regarding Indigenous Peoples Day. It starts at 6 a.m. and our poet laureate, Gillian Morris, has been invited to partake and to be one of the guests in the special programming that's going to take place on CBC Ontario Morning. So that will be tomorrow, and I know she's going to make us proud. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Councillor Madigan.
Thank you very much, Acting Mayor Hall. And thank you to my colleague for mentioning National Indigenous Peoples Day tomorrow. So that was going to be my community announcement, and I look forward to hearing the others. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Doherty.
Thank you. Theatre Collingwood is once again featuring their Portside Festival during the month of July. This is truly a story where out of necessity from COVID came invention. And the Portside Festival was very successful last year, and so they will be reprising in July of 2022. And if you don't have tickets yet, you can get them either online or at the Theatre Collingwood box office in the Simcoe Street Theatre.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thanks.
That's great. Councillor Berman.
Nothing for me tonight, thanks.
Okay. Councillor Jeffrey.
Nothing this evening, thank you.
Okay. Councillor Hamlin.
Yes, thank you. On Wednesday this week between 4:30 and 6, the Institute of Southern Georgian Bay is holding the second in its series called Local Sustainable Economies. And this one is about sustainable, affordable housing, data to drive effective decision making. The intent of this is to gather together residents and business, government, nonprofit, and philanthropic leaders together to discuss how each of us can help. So there'll be two speakers, our very own Mark Shabanetti, and also Stuart Reed, who's the executive director of the Community Foundation, Grey Bruce. So if one was just to go onto the website for the Institute of Southern Georgian Bay, it's free. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. And Councillor Carrier.
Nothing for me, Acting Mayor Hall. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Well, I appreciate Councillor Hamlin, you bringing up your notice because I had it in my calendar for tomorrow at 4. So clearly, I'm off to a good start with the wrong agenda, wrong meeting for tomorrow. So anyway, thank you. I just wanted to bring up a couple of things. I too just wanted to recognize that our poet laureate will be on the radio tomorrow. If you haven't had a chance to hear from her, she is quite a talented, special woman. The first time I think I heard from her was several years ago when she spoke at our Canada Day celebration in front of the federal building. And she spoke to the truths as it relates to being an Indigenous person. And it was a uncomfortable but important speech that she gave, speaking to the experience of Indigenous peoples and their relation as it is to Canada Day. So since then, we've heard from her a couple of times, both here as well as in other capacities. And again, she is a very talented woman, and I look forward to hearing what she has to offer tomorrow morning to start the day. The second is that on June the 30th, and this is from 9 to 3 p.m., it is a virtual opportunity. It's a housing workshop, and it is done in collaboration with the town of Collingwood and the UN Urban Economy Forum. This is part of the work that is being done collaboratively between the two. There'll be a fall 2-day session, but this one specifically is 1 day, June 30th, 9 to 3, and you can find additional information online through our website. All are welcome. This is really open to anyone who is interested as it relates to the subject matter of affordable, attainable housing, whether you are a member of the public, whether you're within the building, whether you're within government, whether you're interested in hearing about and advocating for the subject. It's something I would encourage people to attend. And again, you can find more information online. The second or the third is that, and I've already seen that the papers have picked this up, but starting June the 27th, the Centennial Pool, unfortunately will be closed for the summer. That's the bad news. The good news is that the community received a grant in the form of $294,000 from the province and Trillium, and it is going to allow us to move away from a concrete structure and tile it, thus allowing us to be able to operate on a year-round basis without having to close for the sake of emptying the tank, cleaning, and then repainting. So this is a positive that has, unfortunately, some short-term implications for our local Clippers Club. It won't have an implication. Their annual event is taking place on the 25th and 26th, and then the closure starts on the 27th. And lastly, I just would like to mention on behalf of the county that flags have or will be lowered across the county in recognition of the passing of Dr. Thomas Vincent Gary, who passed in his home community of Brechin on June the 15th. Thomas was or Tom, as he was known to many, was a former mayor with the township of Mara and then the township of Ramara, and was warden of the county for the year of 2002. And he passed peacefully in his home community of Brechin in his 89th year. And those are my announcements. And with that, we will continue forward here with our agenda item number 6, and it's our deputation. And we have Mr. Kenneth Hale, or Ken, on behalf of Dunn Capital Corporation. Welcome, sir. 10 minutes, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I think Clerk has a very quick slide deck here. Thank you. I'm Ken Hale. I am Vice President at Dunn Capital. I'm here tonight as a follow-up to my conversation with the Standing Committee last week, and I'm pleased to report that we've worked very well over the last week with staff and town legal counsel, and I hope that we've worked with the town and put a resolution together that is acceptable for 500 Hume Street, which was an ICBL exemption request. An ICBL exemption request so we can move forward with a Candlewood Hotel. which will be directly adjacent to the Holiday Inn Express that's there now. I just want to give you a quick timeline of events over the last 5 or 6 years, convey my thanks to staff and planning and engineering and legal and the CAO's office for working with us, and hope we can move this project forward. Next slide, please. So just, there's a lot of information on this slide, and trust it'll be there for your deliberations tonight. But essentially in 2018 in April, we received a site plan agreement, was authorized by council, and we executed that agreement and was registered on title. At that time, and still today, hotel and office are permitted uses on the zoning property, zoned on the property. In the summer of 2018, I'm sure you all saw the construction in the first year of this council's term. We did all the site works. We commissioned the water and the other services, and we obtained a security reduction. In that summer, we also started construction on the Holiday Inn Hotel. In 2019, the foundation for which the Candlewood Hotel is going to be built upon received a building permit, conditional building permit from the Town of Collingwood Building Department for a 3-story office building. We paid our full building permit fees and development charges. This was obviously prior to the passing of the ICBL bylaw in 2021. As this council is aware that they're obviously fully versed in it. And there's a clause in there that we prevent the erection or use of any building or structure for which a permit has been issued. What we're applied for in May 27th of 2022 is an exemption to move forward with, instead of building an office building on that pad, to build a hotel on that pad. And it's a we're converting it to the existing permits to a hotel building permits. And we've done the detailed calculations in a number of different ways with the engineers, both our engineers and working with the town engineers. To the extent we actually had a Zoom meeting, a few of them this week, actually sitting there, all of us going through line by line item, and can confirm that, and the staff report confirms that we agreed that the hotel uses less water than the office. And those detailed calculations staff can speak to later. So we are seeking to change that use to hotel to allow us to move forward, excuse me, and the bottom line is we'd be using less water than an office building. And so that brings us to this last week. As I've said, we worked well with staff and in the past council of the past many decades, and we're here tonight, and staff have provided an amended report to the committee agenda, which is seeking to move forward this pad on the property alone. It's by the actual address, so what staff has put forward tonight is looking at providing an exemption for what is 502 Hume Street. 500 is the blanket address, but 502 Hume Street is specific to just the Candlewood Hotel. So if anybody has any questions, I'm here to try to answer any.
Great. Well, thank you, Ken, and I appreciate the opportunity to have you back. For those who are perhaps watching either here or at home, the matter did come before development operations, and it, no, my apologies, not development operations, but our special meeting, and was referred to staff, and has now come back this evening as was promised, and we'll be dealing with it later in the agenda. Is there anyone around the table that has a question for the gentleman? Yes, please.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. Mr. Hale, so with this one pad, are you satisfied that this is all that you're going to need for now?
With respect to the ICBL, yes, absolutely.
Super, thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Carrying through then to number 7 on the agenda, and that takes us to reports, minutes of other committees and boards. We do have one this evening, and that the minutes of the following boards be hereby received, and recommendations contained therein be approved. And the one that we are receiving and approving is for the Collingwood Public Library Board minutes of May 26, 2022. Could I have a mover and a seconder? Councillor Barman, thank you, as our representative, and a seconder, Councillor Jeffrey. Are there any questions as it relates to these minutes? Question? Okay, yep, go ahead.
Sorry, wrong card. I have received an answer by email from CAO Kulchiki, but I just thought if anybody is reading the report, the statistical report for April, they're going to see in the highlights that a number of parameters, in fact, most parameters are showing a fairly dramatic decrease versus year ago. So I did inquire of CAO Kulchiki, and if she's on, I may allow her to give the response in her own words.
Do we have our library CEO with us tonight?
Through the chair to Councillor Doherty, she is not online with us this evening.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. So anyway, her response to me was that it was a matter of the time of year that these statistics were pulled, and that in fact they're tracking very positively versus a year ago. And with regard to transitioning back to in-person events, while the numbers are tracking lower than a year ago, they will, by the end of year, almost assuredly be ahead.
Okay.
So, in case anybody was interested, as was I.
Okay. Thank you. That said, then, I will look to call the vote then to receive. All those in the affirmative, and that's carried unanimously. Thank you. Moving through to item 8, our standing committee reports. First one is 8.1, corporate and community services. And the first items that I will read through, these were items that were received and voted on unanimously. And then we'll move forward through to a staff report where there was a dissenter, that being me. So the first is that Council received the Corporate and Community Services Standing Committee report from its meeting held June 6, 2022, and hereby approve the recommendations contained within the report as presented. The first is CCS 2022-08 Collingwood Stream Health Urban Biological Characterization Report. The recommendation to support the NVCA efforts to discover the health of Collingwood's urban streams and follow the report to negotiating neighboring municipalities to gauge interest in collaborating on Blue Mountain watershed monitor and rehabilitation efforts. The second is CCS 2022-09 revisions to salary administration and new positions policies, and the recommendation to adopt revised HR policies B05 non-union salary administration and B03 new positions, and recast HR policy B04 job evaluation as a procedure. And PRC 2022-06 harbor parking and launching correction, the recommendation to re-implement the visitor seasonal boat launch pass and extend the radius allowable for non-residents to purchase seasonal parking passes to include Singhampton. And finally, the Downtown Garden Master Plan, recommendation to receive the BIA and Downtown Garden Master Plan. Can I look to our chair and our vice for a mover and seconder for those? Okay, so moved and seconded, thank you. Is there anyone that would like to pull a specific item for either a question or perhaps even a different direction? I've got Councillor Hamlin first and then Councillor Doherty. And if you could just let us know the item and then speak to it, please.
Thank you. My item is the Downtown Garden Master Plan.
Okay, go ahead, please.
Thank you. I have a question for staff. I think Director Collver would be the person on this. I was so pleased to see that we had a garden master plan prepared and that it was brought forward to the committee. The downtown gardens have been, an issue, let's just say, for the last few years. And I was so happy to see this plan. I was very happy with it. And my question is, I can see some of the obligations in the plan would be those of staff of the town, and others would be obligations of the BIA. I'm wondering how those obligations are being divided and if there's a plan with a timeline for implementation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So I'll go through our CAO, and I see that Director Collver has joined us. So. Okay, Director Collver, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Acting Mayor. Yeah, so there is a plan evolving from what we received in the Garden Master Plan, and staff and the BIA are working together on those details. The BIA was fortunate enough to receive a grant to fund all of the Zone 1 recommendations. So those are going to be the priority to complete to meet the requirements of the grant. But on a long-term basis and go-forward basis, the town will be working in partnership with the BIA and building priorities for each year, subject to budget funding either from the BIA or the town with council's approval.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Great, thank you. CAO Skinner, you have a comment?
Thank you, Chair. Through you as well to Councillor Hamlin. I just wanted to also add that we've made a lot of strides lately in an MOU with the BIA, and a part of that is also divvying up who does what with respect to gardens. So there's some more context within that document and an update that through council direction is expected to come forward as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Doherty.
Yes, thank you. And I also had questions with regard to the downtown garden master plan. But I have passed those on to staff, and I don't think it's necessary to add to this discussion tonight on these detailed matters. The other question that I had, comment that I had was with regard to the stream health monitoring project that is being undertaken by the NVCA and the town. Just to say, I'm so happy to see that this is being implemented as we grow at the rate that we are growing, and our developments are expanding into all of our green spaces, in particular alongside streams. It's very important for us to understand what impact those developments may have and efforts to mitigate. The other question that I would have, and perhaps our chair of the NVCA board, Acting Deputy Mayor McLeod, could answer. Is there a plan for the Townline Creek and the Silver Creek to be considered? Now, not this year, obviously, but in the foreseeable future. In particular, Townline Creek, we know to be extremely compromised right now, and it just would be good to get an assessment of just what the implications are.
Thank you. I'm going to actually defer that one to the CAO, who is more familiar with the work plan, having been part of the discussions with the NVCA on this.
Thank you.
Go ahead, please.
Thank you. Through the chair to Councillor Doherty. One of the reasons that I looked interested when you asked your question related to Townline Creek is that Townline Creek is actually part of the Grey Sauble Conservation Authority, and it actually mixes a little bit with Silver Creek as just before, in the wetland, just before it enters the bay. But both conservation authorities do a regular watershed report card. Every 4 or 5 years, they'll publish a report card. I know there was one published for Town Line Creek not too long ago, so we'd be able to find that, and someone who went to the Grey Sauble, in this case, Conservation Authority website, would be able to look at the latest publication. What's been proposed and what is reported on here in your package today is in fact an enhancement of the normal reports that are done for this by both conservation authorities for the rivers in their respective watersheds. So we're really happy to see that happening. And it's also something that, if I could add a little extra, the water, of course, comes through the entire bowl of the watershed, coming through several other municipalities before it outlets here in Collingwood, as you would have seen from the video, NVCA video we had recently. So some of the work of the various conservation authorities is actually quite helpful in that we don't want the water to get dirty before it gets here. So when we test it here, we know everything that's happened upstream to keep it clean and blue. So as a final comment, we can, as staff, just put an inquiry in with the other conservation authority to see if there's some of the same capabilities to get new updates and potentially enhance that work on Town Line Creek as well. And I just wanted to acknowledge that we do have Nicole Yardy and I believe even NVCA around this evening if there were more detailed questions on this topic that we're all interested in. Thank you.
Thank you, CEO Skinner. Does that provide an answer that you're looking for?
Yes, it does in part. We may not be able to answer the question with regard to Town Line Creek, but I'm wondering if Nicole or our representative from NVCA, if they're here, have an idea as to whether the Silver Creek will be assessed in the foreseeable future.
Sure. So I'll go through our CAO for either an introduction or direction as to the appropriate persons.
Thank you, Chair. I think Nicole is on point for us leading this project and probably is the right person for that response.
Perfect. Welcome, and thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you, and through you, Acting Mayor Hall, to Councillor Doherty. At this time, we're just doing Pretty River and Black Ash Creek, but within talks within the NVCA, there is potential to expand the project in the future. So there's a possibility there, but we don't have an accurate timeline on what other streams and rivers will be monitored in the future.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
That answers my questions.
Perfect. Thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you. And through you, Chair, as a further response, there will be discussions with the Nottawasaga Valley Conservation Authority and our staff regarding the memorandum of understanding regarding services, the levels 1, 2, and 3 categories of services which will be funded. Level 1 will be mandatory services. Levels 2 and 3 will be opt-in for municipalities. And certainly, I'm not entirely sure whether this type of report falls under number 2 or number 3. I didn't have those notes with me at this moment. However, if you're interested in that sort of thing, it will certainly be something that we can discuss when that memorandum of understanding comes to council in the not too distant future.
Excellent.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Perfect. Any other questions, comments specific to the items that have already been tabled? So I've got our chair, Councillor Madigan, and our seconder is Vice Chair McLeod. And call the question, all those voting in the affirmative. And that is carried unanimously. Thank you. Moving forward then, the next staff report coming from that specific meeting is item 8.1.2, and it's C 2022-21 Business Licensing Bylaw Update. And the amendment that council enact a bylaw to amend bylaw number 2010-64 business licensing bylaw to appoint council as the license committee. And before I proceed, I'm going to turn to our staff. The report that is part of our agenda package tonight contains 3 options, and perhaps you could walk us through if possible. To our deputy clerk, go ahead.
All right, thank you, Chair Hull. On behalf of Clerk Almus, who's not able to be here this evening, I can run through the three options that are available. So the intent was to recommend the licensing committee be turned over to the Committee of Adjustment Property Standards Appeal Committee in total. So they would have the final appeal say on any that come forward from the business licensing bylaw. So the three options before you today are number one, that the licensing committee is the Committee of Adjustment Property Standards Committee, and Council has the final approval. This was discussed at the standing committee meeting. The second option in Appendix B is the Licensing Committee is Council as the only and final appeal body, so any appeals that come out from the business licensing bylaw would go directly to Council for consideration. And Appendix C, which is staff's recommendation, is the Licensing Committee, is the Committee of Adjustments Property Standards, and is the final decision-making body pertaining to business licensing appeals. Be happy to answer any questions that the council may have.
Thank you, and I appreciate the update and walking us through the various options. If you could help me specifically, just before I continue to proceed, we have the three, and one, and it, because it was me, the reason that it's pulled and it was not unanimous, is the one contained on the floor already and needs to be voted first before the other two can be considered?
Thank you, Chair Hall. That would be my recommendation, yes.
Perfect, thank you.
So.
Okay. So that said, out of that committee then, if somebody would like to be the mover and seconder of that, and then we will vote, or at least table it, open it up for discussion, and then vote. And if it's voted in the affirmative, then we move on. If it's not, the other two options come into play. So you're moving that? And do I have a seconder from that committee? I'm going to go with Councillor Berman. Okay. And are there any questions, comments specific to the option that was voted on at committee? Please.
Thank you, Acting Mayor Hall. I wasn't here for the meeting. I was in Western Canada, so I just wanted to state that I'm in favor of the recommendation as it's presented, that I believe it should be Council's decision, not any other committee. I'm also of the mind that there should be no committee adjustment anyways, but that's a different issue. So I'm supportive of the recommendation as presented.
Okay. Councillor Hamlin, go ahead.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I was actually happy to see the revised or the amended report come forward for this meeting with the additional information. I'm quite concerned about Council being the appeal body on licensing matters. Licensing, you know, and I noticed the words were used in the staff report also mentioning the vending truck, so I'm guessing that this will be the next thing that'll be licensed in our community. But these licenses, we're dealing with whether or not a person can carry on a business, whether their business license should be repealed, or whether special conditions should be attached to their business license that are different from any others in the class. And my view is that this should not be a politicized process. It should be fair, open, transparent, and not subject to, well, I think the words that were used in the recommendations of the judicial inquiry regarding procurement was political actors should remain at arm's length. So that's my view, and I would not be voting in favor of this. Thank you.
Okay. Just for clarity, I do appreciate the sentiment and where you were going. Vending trucks are currently licensed through the municipality.
Through the chair to Councillor Hamlin, so our business licensing bylaw currently licenses food vendors, which includes food trucks, secondhand goods, and buskers.
Yeah, thank you for that clarification. I was recalling the discussion that got postponed about allowing certain vendors that would be selling alcohol down on the waterfront last year. So I guess that'll be something coming back. Thank you.
Okay. Go ahead, Councillor Jeffrey, and then I've got Councillor Doherty.
Thank you, Acting Mayor Hall. My question would be, who prepares the recommendations and the reports, be it whether it's for Committee of Adjustment or for Council? My assumption is it would be the same support staff. So Council wouldn't be developing these recommendations on their own. There would be some professional input from staff in that regard. I just would like clarification on that, maybe perhaps through to the CAO.
Sure. To our staff.
Thank you, and through the chair, I will pass that question on to Deputy Clerk Dahl. She's very involved in those items.
Thank you, CAO Skinner. Councillor Jeffrey, you are correct. So the licensing officer, who is clerk services staff, would be providing a report with outlining all the various issues or reasons to not be issuing the permit, or any conditions we'd be looking for if council chose to issue the permit.
Thank you for that response.
Councillor Doherty, you had your card go up? Yeah, go ahead.
Yes, I did, and I just want a clarification. So the new option staff recommended, the licensing committee is the Committee of Adjustment, Property Standards, and the final decision-making body. So that is different from the original recommendation? Okay.
Yep,
Go ahead.
through the chair to Councillor Doherty, that is correct. The recommendation that came forward from the standing committee had the Committee of Adjustment as the appeal body, and then if the appellant didn't agree with that decision, they could bring it forward to council for final decision.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
Go ahead.
Thank you. And through the chair to the committee, or rather to the council, just as a reminder, I'm not sure if all of us watched the or participated in the meeting where this recommendation from the committee came to us. Contained in that staff report was a piece of information that this particular appeals process has been used exactly never. So ever before. So this isn't really. I just think that's a salient piece of information for members of council to have. Thank you.
Yep, go ahead, Councillor Hamlin.
So I guess my question through staff is, if this has never been used, why are we dealing with this, and why is there an issue about whether it comes to council?
Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Hall. To Councillor Hamlin. So when we were reviewing the business licensing bylaw back in the winter, we were focused on food vendors. After taking a further look at it, the food vendor licenses are getting more complicated. We're dealing with specific public property locations now, so there is a higher ability for someone to appeal a decision that the licensing officer may make. In hindsight, we should have opened up the whole bylaw and, made the recommendation at that time. So we're here today to adjust it from the Police Services Board to another body.
Thank you. And I guess my comment, and I'll just finish with this, is, I know, where I'm coming from is I just really want to make sure when we're dealing with our small businesses who will be applying for these licenses and maybe dealing on appeals, that it's all fair, above board, and politics doesn't enter into it. And I know recently we had a matter before us to deal with exemptions for businesses and property owners for purposes of water. And the next day after our meeting was the date to open applications for exemptions. And I had spoken to people who wanted an exemption. I said, the next day you can file your application. They're all going to be dealt with together. And then, of course, when we had that meeting at council the day before that, a few had put in letters from architects and so on. And lo and behold, we had quite a discussion here about protecting small business at all cost. And there was a vote in favor of those who had managed to get letters in before the others the day before. So it's with those things in mind that I'm speaking about the need for fairness and not a political process when it comes to our small business community. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hamlin. Councillor Carrier?
Yes, I just want to clarify my comments. In my many deputations over the last several years across Ontario and other provinces, a lot of local councils are the Committee of Adjustment. And it's an open and transparent process. I mean, it's politicized in the context that it's before politicians, but it's certainly more open and transparent because these processes are highly more visible to the public. And that's why I think the Committee of Adjustment should be done at the Planning Committee level. And I think that this licensing committee component should be addressed to council. This is an open and transparent public process. This council has put in numerous checks and balances to ensure that there's a fair hearing to the people. And so let's put it to the test. And let's take the dirty connotations of politicizing and let's make it a positive process, that it's open and transparent and you can trust the people that you elected, because I certainly trust all of you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Are there any more questions, comments specific to what has been put on the floor? Okay. So this is coming directly out of the meeting on the 6th, and we have it tabled, and I'm going to call the question. And again, if it passes in the affirmative, then we move on. If it doesn't, then we potentially would be looking at alternative options that were either part of the staff report or those that could be potentially even put on the floor from others. So first I'll call the question. Those who are voting in the affirmative. Okay, and those opposed. And it's noted and therefore carries, and we move on. Okay, thank you. That takes us to Standing Committee Report of June the 6th, 8.2.1. The Council received the Strategic Initiative Standing Committee Report. No, sorry. I'm going to go back up. I didn't read in the bylaw, correct?
Thank you. I was just trying to interrupt you there. Thanks.
Yep. And to assist with me, Deputy Clerk, the bylaw that I'm about to read in now, because this is what came out of committee, I can just read what's there.
That's correct.
Great, thank you. The bylaw number 2022-51 being a bylaw to amend bylaw number 2010-64, business licensing bylaw, be enacted and passed this 20th day of June 2022. I'll look for a mover and seconder. I've got Councillor Madigan, and sorry, Councillor Jeffrey, and those in the affirmative. Okay, and those opposed. So noted, and again, it carries. And now we move on, so thank you. 8.2.1, the Council received the Strategic Initiative Standing Committee report from its meeting held June 6, 2022, and hereby approved the recommendations contained within the report as presented. And it's T22-04, 2021, audited financial statements, the recommendation to approve the 2021 audited financial statements. Can I get a mover and a seconder? I've got Councillor Madigan, Councillor Berman. CEO Skinner, is there anything further to report from what was presented?
I do not believe that there's anything else on the audited financial statements. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Is there anything further from around the table in terms of questions of clarification? Yes?
If I could just remind you to extract 10 Golfview Drive from the list, and I'll leave the room at that time. Thank you.
We're dealing with 8.2.821.
Oh, I'm not there yet. Thank you.
No worries. See, we're even. I had the meeting tomorrow night. You had it Wednesday, so we're good to go. Okay, so I've got a mover and seconder. I will call the question. Those in the affirmative, and that carries unanimously. Taking us then to the Special Strategic Initiatives meeting, June 13, 2022. And we do have the list of properties, and we will separate out the two, the one being 10 Golfview Drive, the other being 88 Madeline Drive for Councillors Hamlin and Councillors Doherty appropriately. So one is that the Council received the Special Strategic Initiative Standing Committee report from its meeting held June 13, 2022, and hereby approve the recommendations contained within the report as presented. CAO 2022-09, Interim Control Bylaw number 2021-024, Exemption Requests, Short-Term Exemption Program Intake number 1, and the recommendations passed unanimously at standing committee. The recommendations that the following properties be exempt from the provisions of the interim control bylaw, number 2021-024, and I'll read them out. 111 Napier Street, 1 Nettleton Court, 10 Day Drive, 68 Georgian Manor Drive, 33 Glen Road, 7704 Poplar Side Road, 40 Georgian Manor Drive, 65A and 65B St. Vincent Street, 9 Jupiter Court, 132 Bartlett Boulevard, 9402 Beechwood Road, Summit View Subdivision. These are plans 51M-1170, lots 42 to 47, 181 to 195, blocks 236 to 254, 294, and 295. 2 Spruce Street, 142 6th Street, 60 and 62 Collins Street. So I will look for a mover and seconder for all of the above. Councillor Madigan, Councillor Doherty. Any questions, comments specific to what I've just read through? And I'll call the question in the affirmative, and that passes unanimously. And I'll ask, yes, Councillor Hamlin at 5:50 to step aside. And the recommendation that the following property be exempt from the provisions of the interim control bylaw, number 2021-024, subject property 10 Gulfview Drive. Councillor Hamlin stepped away. Mover and seconder, please. Councillor Jeffrey, Councillor Doherty. Questions or comments? And seeing none, all those in the affirmative, and that is unanimous. And we'll have Councillor Hamlin back at 5:51. And 80 Madeline has been separated, but you'll be staying with us at the table as noted previously. Thank you. So the recommendation that the decision on the following property be deferred, and it is 80 Madeline Drive. Mover and seconder. Got Councillor Jeffrey, and I've got Acting Deputy Mayor McLeod. Any questions, comments? Before I call the question, anything further to update as it was deferred from last week?
Thank you, Chair. Director Valentine is available to provide a brief update of our discussions with the Conservation Authority on this file and the stakeholder group that was engaged as well.
Okay, great. Good evening, Director Valentine. The floor is yours. Welcome.
Good evening, and thank you, Mr. Chair. As it relates to 80 Madeline Drive, we were able to meet with the proponents last week, and they did submit some additional information related to installation of services under Town Line Creek. And staff have also made initial contact with the Grey Sawbull Conservation Authority to address some of the questions that were raised around the committee table about hazard lands in the area. But the meeting with the Conservation Authority has not yet occurred, and we are hoping to get that meeting underway later this week. At the same time, the proponent did reach out to the Blue Mountain Watershed Trust, who you'll recall had voiced some concerns about the development at the Strategic Initiatives Committee. Subsequent to that interaction, the representative of the trust did follow up with staff, and he had indicated that as long as the proposal is for a single family dwelling only, and that no changes to the zoning that applied to the property is being requested, that their specific concerns would be alleviated. And staff would confirm that only a single family dwelling is proposed, and that house would need to conform to the zoning in place on the property and the registered development agreement, both of which were a result of an Ontario Municipal Board process. So we were not able to connect with the Conservation Authority, and there was a few questions specific to that will specifically require their input. So we had left it that staff would return to committee or council at a future date with answers to those questions at that time. Thank you for the opportunity to provide an update.
Okay, thank you. Maybe if I can, I'd appreciate the opportunity to ask one question. And that'll be through you to Director Valentine. And I apologize, Director Valentine, I didn't have an opportunity to reach out because I just thought of it now. And that is that if we go back to the committee meeting, when we deferred this, we didn't actually put a timeline. It was sort of open-ended that, this would be communicated through to the Conservation Authority. But in fairness to the proponent, you know, I think that there should be perhaps a timeline in which it could be established, unless you feel it's not necessary. And I'll look to your guidance. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And we certainly did realize that timing would be tight to get in the room with the Conservation Authority. So we are targeting to bring this back on July the 4th and to the Strategic Initiatives Committee table, and do feel that that is attainable. On the alternative, council may feel like they have enough information tonight to make a decision. The proponent did reach out to the Blue Mountain Watershed Trust, and it appears that their concerns are alleviated. However, if you'd still like to hear feedback from the Conservation Authority, then we would have to await that meeting. And we do feel like it's reasonable that that would occur before the 4th of July.
Okay, thank you. The gentleman who is representing the Blue Mountain Foundation, or the Blue Mountain Watershed Trust Foundation, isn't with us. But does anyone have a question or comment based on the information that has now been presented to us? Councillor Carrier?
Yes, thank you. Having sat at the Conservation Authority for a number of years and 3 years as chair, I do know and understand the important value that they provide to the town in its planning process. I'm comfortable with waiting until that advice is received in full before an exemption is granted on this property. This is some pretty significant lands out there, and it would be very nice to hear what the professionals at the conservation authorities are going to offer for the town's better input.
Okay, fair enough. Any further question, comment? Okay. And I apologize. Did I ask for a mover and seconder specific to this? Yes, thank you. So then I am going to call the question as it is, and that is on the deferral. And those voting in the affirmative. And it is carried unanimously. Thank you. So this takes us down to the next staff report under item 8.3.2. And it is CAO 2022-09, Interim Control Bylaw number 2021-024, Exemption Request, Short-Term Exemption Program Intake number 1. And it's the recommendations not passed unanimously and therefore brought here tonight. So there are two items, and if direction is changed for the first, then we'll move on with the second, and that's the option that has been presented tonight in the staff report. So I'll read it out, and that is that, and further that a decision on the ICBL exemption application for the lands identified as 500 Hume Street. I'll just look to the deputy clerk. That is 502 now. Is that correct?
This motion is specific to 500 Hume Street. The recommendation in the staff report refers to 502.
That's right. And we okay. Thank you for the clarification. Yeah. So with that, I take a step back. 500 Hume Street be deferred pending A, legal advice, B, the submission and review of an application for an amendment to the site plan control agreement, and C, a confirmation of the estimated water consumption, the SDU's requirements for the site. And again, we've had a second deputation this evening on behalf of the developer, and we have our applicant, and we have an updated staff report. This item was referred to staff with a vote of 6-2, and we need to put it back, and it needs to be either voted in the affirmative, to which we move forward with that. If it's defeated, then we can potentially look at the second option. Have I got that path correct? Excellent. Okay. So is there a mover and seconder to put the first part back on the floor? I've got Councillor Hamlin, Councillor Doherty. Okay. And just to be crystal clear, what we're voting is if it's voted in the affirmative, what I have read in and tabled is what's carried forward. If it's defeated, then the option that has been presented by staff or potentially something else tabled could potentially be put on the floor. Yes, sir.
Could we have a recorded vote, please?
Okay. So we have a mover and seconder, and I'll ask the deputy clerk to call for a recorded vote.
Thank you, Chair Hall. All those in favor, please raise your yes cards. All those opposed, please raise your no cards. And that is defeated unanimously.
And I appreciate the two for putting it on the floor so that the business could be conducted. So I'm going to read in the option that's been presented and further that the proposed building identified at 502 Hume Street be exempt from the provisions of the interim control bylaw number 2021-024 and added to the bylaw Schedule A for a change of use to a business type hotel for a total municipal servicing capacity commitment of an estimated 35 single dwelling unit equivalents or SDUs. We had good discussion prior, and we had two individuals at the table who are prepared to move forward. So I'm going to look, if they are willing, for Councillor Carey or Councillor Madigan to move and second. Mover and a seconder. Any questions specific to what I've just read? Yes, sir.
Just a recorded vote, please.
Okay. Before I ask for the vote, any questions? Okay, seeing none then. Deputy Clerk Dahl.
Thank you, Chair Hall. All those in favor, please raise your yes cards, and that is passed unanimous.
Great. Thank you. And Mr. Hale, you're welcome to stay, or you can. Okay. Just a reminder that the Yankees took 2 out of 3 over the weekend. Moving along then, that takes us though to the bylaw as it relates to this matter. And under 8.3.3, bylaw number 2022-52, being a bylaw to amend interim control bylaw number 2021-024 be enacted and passed this 20th day of June 2022. And again, I'll look to Councillor Carrier and Madigan as our mover and seconder. Any questions? Yes.
Sorry, Chair Hall. I just wanted to clarify because 502 Hume Street was added, this bylaw will be approved as amended to include that property.
Perfect. Thank you. Appreciate that. Okay. If there are no questions or clarification, then I'll call the question. Those in the affirmative? And that too is unanimous. If somebody wants to have fun with Mr. Hale, you could call him and tell him the bad news. So now he's walked out. Moving then to number 9, staff reports, 9.1. And that is that T 2022-05, level 3 charging stations. It's a joint project with EPCOR and tourism funding. That staff report T 2022-05, level 3 charging stations, joint project with EPCOR tourism funding be received. Is there somebody that would like to speak to this from a staffing perspective? This is a good news piece. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Treasurer Quinlan was the one who brokered this approach that we're recommending to Council, and she could give you a brief summary if you would like.
Great. Okay. Treasurer Quinlan, welcome. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Acting Mayor Hall. And I will just give a quick brief summary because I think there's quite a bit of detail in the report. But as council members may recall, as part of the EPCOR purchase agreement, EPCOR was required, if it was economically feasible, to install some electric vehicle charging stations within the town. There were lots of proposed options. Most were for 2 level 2 stations at varying areas within the town. And there were also a couple of proposals brought forward for 1 level 3 station. Those discussions had occurred mainly prior to COVID. And I think with COVID and just everything going on, that they paused for a while. But this new grant program was initiated. So we've picked up those discussions once again with EPCOR. So what we're proposing along with EPCOR as a joint project is that 2 level 3 stations be installed in the Eddie Bush parking lot. We did review several different sites, both with EPCOR and amongst department heads as well. And we felt that this was the best location, just given its visibility for both visitors and community members as well. And that it provides such a strong link to the downtown core, which allowed us to apply for the RTO7 funding for their tourism fund. So we are in receipt or have been awarded the $50,000. However, prior to signing that agreement, I thought it was necessary to bring this forward as we did not include this in the budget since it wasn't anticipated during budget time. So what we're requesting now is that we do receive funding of $50,000 from the Capital Contingency Fund. We are in progress, my apologies, applying through the NRCan grant as well. We have not yet received approval of that yet. However, it is possible that the total of the $50,000 wouldn't be required. So I think that sums it up for us. If anybody has questions, I'll be here.
Thank you. Could I first get a mover and a seconder to receive the report put on the table? Councillor Madigan, Councillor Carrier. Are there any questions to the receiving of the report? Councillor Carrier?
Yes, through you to the treasurer.
Please.
Item 5, where it says effect on the town finances in the report, it does say that the ongoing operational costs associated with this purchase will be covered through the fees charged to the person using the charging station. There wasn't a link to do the price breakdown. What I'm curious is it also part of the asset management plan moving forward so that there will be a surcharge or there'll be a charge to offset the replacement of the asset as opposed to, or is that considered an ongoing operational cost?
Treasurer Quinlan?
Thank you, Acting Mayor Hall. Through you to Councillor Carrier. I think that's a very good question. At this point, our asset management plan has only been written to include core assets. My thoughts are, quite honestly, that it would be included, a fee would be included in the operational costs or in the operational revenue that's received in order to help maintain those locations or stations, I should say. But to be honest, we haven't gotten that far yet. But certainly we'll keep it in mind as we continue to calculate what that fee should be.
Go ahead.
Thank you. For me personally, I think that's an integral component. If we're going to have a buy-in to the EV stations, then I think the people that are utilizing them should be paying actually current market rate of whatever it is for the electricity they're consuming, plus a capital cost component, much like we see with other user fee models, whether it's for the arena or something else. So congratulations on getting the grant. It's an exciting partnership, and it's nice to see it moving forward, but still keeping the fiscal reality of the component and the pricing in check. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Doherty?
Yes, thank you. And I was just going to offer to Councillor Carrier that I did attend the CCAT event last Wednesday night where our charging stations were showcased, and also there was a display of powered cars and e-bikes. Anyway, I was able to speak with Town of Collingwood staff, and although it is very, very early days, it appears as though the revenues coming off the chargers will cover operating and perhaps some element of capital. The uptake has been fantastic. And that is even though we are charging less than market rate, but on the other hand, it does give us the opportunity to increase our rates to closer to market if that seems to be a more prudent way to proceed. So good news story, very early days, but very good news story.
Thank you. Councillor Carrier?
Yeah, that actually just made it a less good news story for me. So if I'm using electricity at home, I pay whatever the going rate is for those hours that I'm using the electricity. Are we subsidizing at the lowest rate possible? What are we doing? Like, I think we should be charging whatever the current value rate is.
So it's not to say that we're not covering the cost of electricity, but our rates are less than what we see over in the Loblaw parking lot, what Loblaw is charging as an example, or what the charging stations over at 10 Keith Street. I may need staff to jump in on this one just to make sure that all my
I've got
facts are right.
one screen and a second screen pop up, so I am going to jump in and ask staff to perhaps take the lead. Please go ahead.
If I may, Acting Mayor Hall. So just to be clear, currently, yes, we fully cover the hydro costs, the maintenance costs, and that value, and whatever that the hydro cost that we are charged, we are trying to cost recover, or we are cost recovering. I should rephrase that. The fee was designed to cover both of those things. There's also a maintenance contract that's in place for the machines. They're supplied by Flow, and we have an ongoing maintenance agreement with them. What we're doing right now is trying to calculate what the best rates may be. We are currently below what we would consider to be market, as our manager of fleet and facilities has gone out to see or get information and feedback from the area EV charging stations. And it seems we're kind of middle of the road, or a little lower than middle of the road, my apologies. However, and just to speak to the uptake hasn't been extremely great yet so far. We think that our expectation that is come this summer, we will see a lot more usage as we get some advertising out there and people are visiting the town and trying to, come into for the shopping and the restaurants and things like that. But a review is scheduled with the fleet and facilities manager for the end of September to take a look at those rates and possibly increase them at that time. And we'll certainly keep in consideration the capital charges as well. But right now, they were originally set up to cover hydro, the maintenance of the costs, and a little bit more on top of that, but not a great amount. Hoping that clarifies things.
Thank you, Treasurer Quinlan. Councillor Carrier?
Yes, thank you to you and Councillor Doherty and the staff. Thank you. And I think this is a great news story, so I don't want anything negative to come out of this. I'm glad we're recovering our costs. We're not a for-profit center, but we are recovering costs plus future capital investment, and that makes perfect sense. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Doherty?
And so I will just qualify my original remarks as to the progress of the usage of those machines. It was my understanding, speaking to staff, that the rate of uptake was a little higher than what they had anticipated, but perhaps it was just one person's anticipation.
Okay, thank you. So on the first part, I do have a mover and a seconder to receive the staff report, so I will call the question. All those in the affirmative, and that is carried unanimously. Sorry, Councillor Berman.
I'm sorry, the deputy clerk had her hand up. I didn't know if you noticed.
Sorry, I apologize. I was just going to see what happened there because I couldn't get your attention, but we were just receiving the report and then we're voting on the second portion of that motion separately. Okay, thank you.
So I'll look to the same mover and seconder if they're okay to move that and further that $50,000 be authorized to support the project and funded through the Capital Contingency Fund. So who are my movers and seconders? Councillor Carrier, Councillor Doherty, all those in favor? And that's carried unanimously. Thank you. We have two motions, and I'll read the first motion in. I'll look for a mover and seconder. But before I do, this is a housekeeping matter, and I just want to confer with the deputy clerk that although I'm identified in the motion, I can read it in and vote on the matter tonight for those who are following along. Great, thank you. So whereas subsection 259 1D, the Municipal Act 2001 provides that the office of a member of council of a municipality becomes vacant if the member resigned from his or her office and the resignation is effective under section 260 of the Act. And whereas notice of the resignation was provided in writing by Mayor Brian Saunderson to the clerk, received Monday, June 6, 2022, in accordance with Section 260 of the Act, with the notice stating the resignation to be effective immediately. And whereas Section 262(1) of the Act provides that if the office of council becomes vacant under Section 259, the council shall, at its next meeting, declare the office to be vacant. Therefore, be it resolved that in accordance with Section 262 of the Municipal Act 2001, Council of the Town of Collingwood does hereby declare the office of mayor, previously filled by Brian Saunderson, to be vacant, and that bylaw number 2022-053 being a bylaw to appoint Keith Hall as mayor for the Town of Collingwood for the remainder of 2018 to 2022 council term, effective July 27, 2022, be enacted and passed this 20th day of June 2022. So first, I'll take the liberty of actually severing it. I'm going to ask for a mover and seconder, and I'm going to call the question to vote on the seat being declared vacant. So mover and seconder, Councillor Madigan, Councillor Jeffrey, and I'll call the question, those in the affirmative, regarding the vacancy. And the seat has now been declared vacant. And I'll look for a mover and seconder to the bylaw to appoint myself, Councillor Madigan and Councillor Jeffrey again. And again, in the affirmative, call a question. And that's carried unanimously. Thank you.
Acting Mayor Hall, I'm just going to request before we move on to the next one, a recorded vote on that for the bylaw, please. Thank you.
Okay. So you'd like me to go back and...
I believe the procedural bylaw before the next motion is put before a member can request a recorded vote of a vote that's already occurred by calling of the chair, which is what I'm doing. Thank you.
So with that, we do have a mover and seconder, and I'll look to the deputy clerk. A recorded vote has been declared or requested, and I'll leave it to you, please.
Thank you, Chair Hull. All those in favor of bylaw 2022-53, please raise your yes cards, and that's passed unanimous.
Okay, thank you. And this one here, 10.2, actually I'm going to turn the chair over to Acting Mayor McLeod, and then with your permission, I'd like the opportunity to read this in.
Thank you, and I will pass it to Acting Mayor Hall.
Okay, thank you. Whereas the Town of Collingwood Community-Based Strategic Plan encourages support of healthcare, social services, and community groups in South Georgian Bay in the identification of gaps and collaboration on solutions, and whereas in recent years the town has implemented a seasonal paid parking program for select locations such as Sunset Point Park, Millennium Park, and the Collingwood Harbor, and whereas local charities are an integral part of the community and frequently organized fundraising events within areas subject to metered parking rates, which can place an undue financial burden on these vital groups. Therefore, be resolved that staff be directed to report back on possible options for providing exceptions to paid parking on a case-by-case basis to charitable groups or non-for-profit organizations operating fundraising initiatives within the paid parking areas at waterfront parks.
And we have a mover in Acting Mayor Hall. Do we have a seconder for this motion? Councillor Madigan. And are there any questions, comments, or queries on this motion? Councillor Jeffrey.
Thank you, Acting Deputy Mayor McLeod. I have to think what the right title. So I generally agree with trying to find some, but I wanted to clarify that our process would allow, because again, this is the cynic in me. I just believe that people who park down there and happen to know that there's a fundraising event going on just use it as an excuse. And so then we punish ourselves doubly in terms of the revenue, but not that we don't want to support the charitable organizations supporting others in our community. I think they deserve support. But my understanding is that on your first offense, if you explain to someone in our Town of Collingwood office here that it can be reversed. So I'm just wondering if we need another process, and I guess that would just be a question for the report going forward. I'd just like to have a better understanding of that whole process.
Thank you. And are you proposing an amendment then, or are you just making sure that staff is aware that this is a concern that you have when they put together the report?
Thank you. I think that I'm just having them aware that it's something I'd like looked at. I don't think I need to amend, because the intention is to look at all the alternatives. So that would be part of the education process, I hope.
I saw the CAO nodding. I think she heard you.
Okay, great. Thanks. She's behind me. I can't see her.
Any other questions or comments from members of council? Acting Mayor Hall, would you like to speak to your motion?
I would, thank you. It is something that is coming out of an event that took place earlier this spring, to which I was in attendance, and I had said at the point I would bring something forward for your consideration to move forward to staff to come back with a report. Councillor Jeffrey, I agree with your comments. I think that it is not meant to be sort of a carte blanche in terms of like you're hosting an event and therefore you should have free parking, across the board, but maybe in collaboration with the group or those that are involved, that if they required, maybe 2-3 spots because they've got some dignitaries or they've got people that are coming from an out-of-market area that would be, applied to normal parking rates, that they would have an opportunity to, in advance, approach the municipality and say, look, we're hosting the event on this day. We need 3 spots at a complimentary basis. And hopefully we would have a report that would be maybe reflective to that, in that spirit. But I'm putting this in staff's hands to look at the overall and see if it's something worth, amending, or whether, it's not, and maybe they come back with the opinion that there's greater, not negativity, that's the wrong word, but it creates greater issue than really it's called for. So I'm putting it in their hands. Thank you.
Thank you. And that appears to be all the comments and questions on this motion, so I will call the question. All those in favor? And that passes unanimously. I will return the meeting to the hands of the acting mayor.
Great, thank you. Yes, please.
Thank you. Through the chair, I did want to make one comment, and it's mostly because I hope that a number of members of the community are watching. Anyone who is a resident in Collingwood can park at Sunset Point for free. So we hope that people do come down in droves to support charity organizations that are have event permits and are doing events at Sunset Point. And if folks don't have already their electronic app hotspot okay for that, then they can talk to the town about it, or call us if you don't have a smartphone. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. Okay. Yes, sir.
Thank you. And to the CAO's comments, I'd like to thank you for pointing that out. I'm one of those people who do not have the app, nor do I wish to have the app. All I did was go into town hall. I just spoke to our very friendly front desk people for help. They put me on a list so that when bylaw enforcement is down at the parks, they look up on their list and you are exempt. It was less than 5 minutes time. So we are here to accommodate as best we can, and staff are doing an excellent job. And thank you, CAO, through the acting mayor, pointing that out.
Okay. Moving forward then, we do have a bylaw under agenda item number 11. It's 11.1, and it's an appointment of bylaw officer. The bylaw number 2022-054, being a bylaw to appoint a municipal law enforcement officer, be enacted and passed this 20th day of June 2022. Aaron Arbon is the gentleman's name who will be appointed. And to put it on the table, do I have a mover and seconder? I've got Councillor Madigan, I've got Councillor Berman, and CAO Skinner. Do we have any comment or introduction?
Thank you, Chair. This is a position that is a full-time permanent position to replace an existing staff member who unfortunately left us for a wonderful job that was a promotion for her. So this is a permanent officer coming into the fold.
Excellent. Okay. So if there are no questions specific to the bylaw, I do have a mover and seconder, and I'll call the vote, though. All those in the affirmative, and it's carried unanimously. Thank you. Moving forward to item number 12, notice of motion. We have one that's part of the agenda package, and I've got one. Potentially there's others, but we'll start with the one that's in the package. It's under item 12.1, AMO Board of Director election. And you'll note it indicates there that we will require, under the procedural bylaw, to waive notice. And so, without any comment or question, I will look for a mover and seconder to waive notice. I've got Councillor Carrier and I've got Councillor Jeffrey. And I will call the question then. All those in favor of waiving notice? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Councillor Doherty, would you like to read your motion? It's now a motion.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Council, for supporting the motion to waive. Whereas the Association of Municipalities of Ontario is a nonpartisan entity that represents the interests of the municipality on policy and program matters that fall within provincial jurisdiction, and whereas AMO's Board of Directors is comprised of elected municipal officials from all regions and sizes of communities to form a broad base of support and provide AMO with the feedback and emphasis required to carry the municipal message to the provincial government. And whereas the AMO annual conference will be held in Ottawa from August 14th to 16th, 2022, during which the annual general meeting will occur, followed by the election of AMO's Board of Directors and reporting caucuses. Be it resolved, therefore, that the Council of the Town of Collingwood endorse Councillor Deb Doherty to stand for election on AMO's Board of Directors and Small Urban Caucus. And further, that Council assume all costs associated with Councillor Deb Doherty attending AMO's Board of Directors meetings up to the allocated approved budget amount estimated at $2,000.
Okay, thank you. Look for a seconder for the motion. Councillor Jeffrey. And do we have any questions, comments for Councillor Doherty? Yes, Councillor Jeffrey.
Thank you, Acting Mayor Hall. Just to say that this is really important for the town to have an opportunity to have one of our council members on that board, and I thank Councillor Doherty for her interest and willingness to pursue it, and so look forward to great results. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, if no other questions, comments, then I will call the question. Those voting in the affirmative. And that is carried unanimously. Fantastic.
Thank you.
I'm going to inject myself for one moment, if I may, and that is that I do recognize, and I think that everyone around the table recognizes, the importance of being part of AMO and the value that being a representative within the organization as opposed to being on the outside is fundamental in terms of the work that's been being done locally. And I'm using that as a segue because I don't believe, and I will be corrected, but the last time we had met, our colleague, Councillor Jeffrey, was headed west. And I know that publicly there has been, but not around the table, there's been no formal acknowledgement that you have been re-elected to the Board of Directors for the Federation of Canadian Municipalities. So congratulations. That's fantastic. So good job. So I do have another notice that I'd like to bring forward. Does anybody else have anything? Okay, I'm going to go with you first, and then because mine's quite minor. So go ahead.
Thank you very much. And my notice of motion will impact perhaps questions that Council may want to ask under 14.2 of the consent agenda. And so I don't think the reading in of the notice of motion should impact Councillor Carrier at all. So whereas on April 25th, 2022, Council passed resolution number RES 157-2022 with respect to direction on the request for a ministerial zoning order, MZO, to facilitate the development of the Poplar Regional Health and Wellness Village. And whereas the proponent indicates that the robust stakeholder consultation required by the town has been completed and has requested that Council endorse a revised MZO, now therefore be it resolved that Council endorse the Poplar Regional Health and Wellness Village project and revised Minister Zoning Order MZO proposed for the Poplar Regional Health and Wellness Village project by considering same at the most expedient strategic initiatives committee meeting, special or regular, to facilitate consideration of the SIC recommendation by Council, either special or regular, to have a decision prior to August 19th, 2022, and further be it resolved that Council directs staff and the consultants to review the consultation records and revised MZO and report back at the SIC meeting per the foregoing timing, and further that all legal and consulting costs continue to be at the full expense of the property owner.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Jeffrey. And as you stated from the outset, given the fact that it's notice and there's no discussion tonight, the declared conflict under 14.2 does not apply, so thank you.
Sorry, and could I also just confirm that that means that that will come up on our council meeting next Monday to provide that direction to get into that cycle of time?
Okay. And I'll just add to that, because it was something that was obviously prepared and read, so it's been provided to staff, but if you could confirm the question for Councillor Jeffrey, please.
Thank you, Chair Hall. So that is correct. The notice of motion was provided this evening and will be on the June 27th council meeting for consideration.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Hall. Hey, that felt good. I wasn't aware that Councillor Jeffrey would be bringing this motion, and so there was one additional item that if we are going to have a discussion on this, that I would add. Perhaps I need to bring my own motion, and so what I would like to do is also bring a motion at the same time as Councillor Jeffrey's motion would be brought back of a similar nature, but also asking staff to report further on the items that our planning consultant identified as being important for us to have included in an MZO before it goes off to the minister. Thank you.
Okay, so again, we'll take that in the spirit of a notice, and obviously that is coming from the table, so you will follow up with our clerk's department with the writing to capture. But I think you, Deputy Clerk Dahl, you got the sense or the, okay. And then if I may, I'll pass the chair back to you, Acting Mayor McLeod, because I'd like to introduce a notice as well.
Sure. And so are there any other notices of motion?
Yes, please. So in terms of importance and complexity, it pales in comparison, but I would like to request staff, and in terms of timing, this is something that could come back next year, perhaps for the new council to consider. But and I would preface it by just stating that I'm asking for something that only applies from a residential perspective. I understand that staff have already provided comment, and as part of the request maybe could provide comment so that the public are aware, but I'm only requesting in the context of residential. And that relates to the no mow May. We have a bylaw in place today that would prevent somebody from participating. And I'd like staff to take a look at that and potentially amend it so that if a person's, i.e. myself, who did participate, would not be in contradiction of the existing bylaw. That's it. Thank you. Thanks.
Sorry, I didn't hear what you said. Which bylaw?
It's the bylaw that would, I don't have the specific in front of me, but it's the property standards bylaw that would relate to the length and the way a person maintains their grass. Currently, there's an existing length, and I clearly breached that during the month of May.
Just through acting deputy mayor, I just didn't hear what you had said.
Oh, fair
and
enough.
now I understand what you're referencing. So thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Just mow your lawn already. And any other notices of motion at this point? Did the CAO want to reply? Or the
I was just going to provide further clarification. It's the long grass and weeds bylaw that we'd be looking at.
Yes, please.
Yeah.
the long grass and weeds bylaw? There we go. And I relinquish the chair.
Okay, thank you. So with that said, it's we're moving now to 13, which is the county report, and I'm going to turn it to our acting deputy mayor for an update as to highlights from the county.
Thank you. I have 3 items that I want to highlight for council and the public today. One of which is that council members will have received in the last little while a notification that we are going to be doing some emergency updates on our emergency procedures, some training. There was a conversation that took place between the county and the province of Ontario regarding whether emergency tabletop exercises in preparation for emergencies still needed to take place, considering we've been in one for 2 years. There was some question about whether the possibility was that might not proceed this year. That is not an option. The answer has come from the province. So that's number one. Number 2, wanted to highlight that we are still having the conversation at the county and between all the municipalities regarding the municipal comprehensive review. And there are 2 items that are coming up in the next little while, which are invitations for public input. One of which is an open house, which is tomorrow between 4:30 and 6 o'clock. It is on Zoom. You can get there through the county's website, simco.ca. Although they did want you to pre-register by Friday, but I bet they'll let you in if you ask nicely. And the other one is a public meeting, which is scheduled for Tuesday, June the 28th at 10 o'clock in the morning, also being held virtually through the Zoom platform. And they do want you to register for that before the 24th of this month. And there's instructions on the county's website. If you do a search on MCR Open House, you can find links to all of those opportunities. I think it's important that as many people as possible weigh in on what the plan is going forward regarding this this multi-pronged, very interesting and yet difficult sometimes to get all the way through type of document and process that we are in the midst of. The third item I wanted to bring to our attention from the meeting that was held on June the 14th was 3 capital projects that the county is involved in currently, one of which is Georgian Village in the community of Beaton. It has broken ground. It is a long-term care campus, which will include all sorts of different levels of care and housing for the aged in our communities. It came in quite startlingly over budget at this point, to the point that there were some comments from around the table from fellow county councillors, somewhere between 17 and 31% at this point is what's being looked at regarding Georgian Village in Beaton. It is a more than $100 million project, and so those numbers start to get really big. Now there was a concern regarding soil compaction and some engineering stuff that added to that complication, but at this point it's really about the incredible, as anybody who's tried to put a deck or a fence up knows, and then multiply that by hundreds of millions, how prices have really gone up when it comes to construction. So anyone who's going to be paying county taxes, which is everyone, that is something to be paying attention to in the year ahead. Furthermore, there's these other 2 projects, one of which is Georgian Manor, which is in Penetanguishene has been given the go-ahead to add 16 long-term care beds to its facility. And that project was originally estimated to be $4.2 million, and it's now gone up by an additional $1.5 million. So we're again dealing with pretty big numbers of increases when it comes to construction. And the ambulance works, there was a report regarding the ambulance bays and places throughout the county where ambulances hang out waiting for emergencies. There's several of which are under construction or under renovation, and in each of those cases, the increase between the estimate that was provided to this capital project a year ago and what's coming forward now is somewhere around 17% in a year, which is equally mind-boggling as the others. So this is just something I bring to your attention because they struck me, those three reports that came in concert of how much we're all facing. When budget time comes, there's going to be some difficult conversations that are going to have to take place in the not too distant future, and I want you to start thinking about that sort of stuff. And I believe that is my account. Oh, the good news is we're getting all these extra beds. The bad news is it's going to be pricey. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions as it relates to the county or county report? Okay. Then moving forward to item 14, it's the consent agenda. We do have two items, and I'll separate them out for you. Okay. Table that council hear and receive the consent agenda. Further, that the information and opinions provided in the general consent items are that of the author and are not verified or approved as being correct. We'll deal with the first. That's 14.1. It's the proclamation, St. John Ambulance Week, June 20 to 26, 2022. And for information, the clock tower is illuminated in red for this week, and the flag raising will take place tomorrow at 11 a.m. And attached for public reference is the proclamation. So I'll look for a mover and seconder to receive. I've got Councillor Hamlin, Councillor Jeffrey, and those in favor of receiving. And is there anyone that has a question, comment specific to that item? Okay, and before I read the second, at 6:41, Councillor Carrier has stepped away. And as the Deputy Clerk indicated earlier, this is an item that was added to the agenda. 14.2, it's Depoche Management Limited and Live, Work, Learn, Play. RE, the proposed Minister Zoning Order, MZO, Poplar Regional Health and Wellness Village, RES-157, 2022, and that's Resolution 157, 2022. Mover and seconder, please. Councillor Jeffrey, Councillor Berman. I'll first call the question to receive, and that is carried unanimously. Any questions, comments, specific? I've got two, Councillor Hamlin, Councillor Jeffrey.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, I noticed the discussion in this correspondence references the community meetings that were held and that there was a lot of discussion and so on. I'm wondering if staff could comment on what the nature of those discussions were and whether any notes were taken that would be shared with us at some point. Thank you.
Great. CEO Skinner, I attended the afternoon, and I know that Director Valentine and Planner Ayers were in attendance. So, Director Valentine, can you provide comment?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, to Councillor Hamlin. So as mentioned, myself and Manager Ayers also attended both of the in-person public meetings, which were primarily a presentation from the proponent, followed by roundtable activities, which allowed the public to ask questions, make comments, and at the same time, a number of written comment cards were distributed and filled out by those in attendance, as well as directing individuals to a web portal should additional comments be warranted. So staff did take some notes, but part of the resolution referenced earlier in the notice of motion from Councillor Jeffries does require the applicant to to document and provide the documentation of the consultation opportunities that were provided. So staff are starting to work through the materials that were provided along with the letter that you see on the consent agenda. And we do understand other materials may also be forthcoming to staff. So we'll look at that documentation, and what we're expecting is a very thorough summary of the comments received at those public meetings, as well as through the other touchpoint opportunities that were provided.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Jeffrey?
Thank you, Acting Mayor Hall. I wanted to pull it just to bring it to council's attention to make sure with my notice of motion, if they have questions that they wanted addressed coming forward, that they had the opportunity to ask them. I think there was a plethora of information in the letter that was provided to us in terms of the responses from the public, but why I'm very keen to have the SIC portion of our process is to allow that public consultation to continue in terms of us being able to hear them as well. And, you know, sometimes reading the comments, I was concerned that some people had misunderstood some things, but really clearly understood others. So I think another round at SIC would be prudent in allowing us to vet that again before we decide on next steps. So I just wanted to put that out there.
Okay, thank you. Before I ask Councillor Carrier to come back, any other questions, comments specific to the item? Okay, so we voted to receive. So at 6:45, if we could ask Councillor Carrier to come back. Okay, thank you. So then continuing forward, we move to item 15, which is council business. And the first being 15.1, old or deferred business. Does anyone have any old or deferred business tonight? 15.2 is other business. Okay, so I've got Acting Mayor McLeod, Councillor Doherty, Councillor Jeffrey. Go ahead.
Thank you. And through the chair to the CAO, I have just a question of process and procedure. I noticed in the library board's minutes that there was discussion regarding delegated authority with regard to emergencies. And I know that we did, as a council, provide an awful lot of delegated authority during the initial phases of the COVID-19 emergency. And I believe with the removal of most of the mask mandates and so on and so forth in the last little while by the province, that we're in a position now where perhaps the emergency is over. And I wonder if you could perhaps speak to or prepare to speak to at some point in the not too distant future whether there is contemplation of the rest of town facilities or town functions coming out from underneath that delegated authority regarding emergencies, as the library has done.
Go ahead, CEO Skinner.
Through the chair, yes, thank you for bringing that up. I think it is time for us to take another look at the delegated authority that was provided by council. We are settling the ship back into regular operations, and perhaps we could bring that forward as an update even as soon as next week. Thank you.
Well, thank you.
Okay, thank you. I had Councillor Doherty.
Yes, thank you, Chair. We are fast approaching Canada Day, which is hard to believe that this year is almost half over. But when we approach holidays like these ones, invariably the discussion of fireworks and the positive and negative aspects of fireworks tends to rise to the fore. So I'm just wondering if I can prevail on Director Collver to outline what our plan is for this Canada Day celebration.
Okay. Through the CAO to Director Collver.
Thank you, Mayor. The plan for this Canada Day is to proceed as we have done traditionally. We have fireworks programmed for the Canada Day event. We did take a look at drones as a possible alternative this year. However, don't have the budget to support it, nor were we successful in receiving grants that we had applied for. We'll continue to look for opportunities to go to quiet fireworks or silent fireworks, or drones is actually really the only feasible silent alternative that we've ever found. But it is a costly endeavor, and we'll either need support through the budget or we'll need to be successful with a grant. But that's the plan for this year, and where we stand on fireworks.
Did you hear that? Okay.
Yes, I did.
Okay.
Thank
Sorry.
you. Oh, that's even better. But I did, and actually we had conversed earlier today. What I would like to do, because the notion of fireworks and the environmental impacts of fireworks comes up again and again. And I would like to, and I will actually, bring forward a notice of motion that firework alternatives be brought into the 2023 budget discussions. I'll bring that on Monday.
Okay. Very good. Councillor Jeffrey.
Thank you, Acting Mayor Hall. So we mentioned FCM, and I thought I'd just give you a real brief snippet. As you know, we have a plethora of opportunities for working plenaries and panels, and all four of the federal parties were represented and speaking to the membership. So the one thing I wanted to comment on tonight, one of the panels were asked in terms of what surprised them out of the pandemic and what happened. And I just thought I'd comment on a national level, the top three. The first really big surprise was the fragility of the supply chain and everything that we are facing right now as municipalities and our costs. And as everybody jumps on the bandwagon, I think whether the costs need to go up or not. But that also included food security. And another big surprise was the Great Resignation. And one of the biggest comments that got a very resounding applause was the fact that in municipalities, we're in the people business. And so a lot of the municipalities are having challenges going to remote service by employees when we're in the people business. So, and I think that will come down to staff being able to sort the jobs of those who need to work with the people and who don't. But those were the big three on the floor nationally at FCM. So I'll bring little snippets as we go, but for sure I know we're being impacted by all of them. So.
Great, thank you. If you didn't see it, it is worth reading. Last week there was an article in the Globe and Mail, or an opinion piece written by Evan Siddell, formerly of Canadian Mortgage Housing Corporation, identifying 4 things that they are doing with their organization now out in Alberta as it relates to employees, and it's worth a read. So go ahead, Councillor Jeffrey.
Thank you. And you just reminded me, I mean, I'm not to discredit, but the number one issue at FCM was housing everywhere. But this wasn't surprising to any municipality in terms of what was happening in housing, because we already had the problem. It just got exacerbated. But it was the things that came out of it that we really weren't prepared for. And those 3 were biggies. So.
Good. Thanks. Councillor Carrier, did you have your card up? No, you're good? Okay. Anyone else with other business this evening? Yes, CAO Skinner.
Thank you for recognizing me, Chair. I probably should have put this into community announcements, but I didn't want the ending of the meeting to go by without recognizing that this is the last council meeting that our current fire chief, Chief Parr, will be attending. So I wanted to draw a little attention to him and his last meeting before his retirement at the end of this month. Thank you for that.
Thank you for mentioning that, and it was nice to have both our outgoing and our incoming chief in attendance. And as was mentioned at that time, we certainly acknowledge the service, the level of dedication, and we wish Chief Parr all of the very best in retirement moving forward. So congratulations. So that, I will then move to our confirmatory bylaw, and that is that bylaw number 2022-55 being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the regular meeting of council held June 20th, 2022 be enacted and passed this 20th day of June 2022. Mover and seconder, please. Councillor Madigan and Councillor Hamlin, and those in favor? Okay, and looking down the right side to Councillor Jeffrey, motion to adjourn. Those in favor? And we are done at 6:54. Thank you. Have a great evening.